What mistake should have killed you? Climbed onto one of those underpasses that allow river water to flow through when I was like 5. Got swept in the current and taken down the river. Only reason I survived is my dad saw my long hair barely under the current and jumped in to save me. Playing with the laundry chute in my childhood home when I was around 5 years old. My cousins and I took turns dropping things down the chute while someone else stood at the bottom and dodged them. For the most part it was things like washcloths, stuffed animals, a clothing item, etc. Just so happened that when I stood under the chute, my cousin dropped a 5-pound dumbbell down and I, expecting something harmless, didn't get out of the way. That ended the game real quick. I now part my hair in a way that hides the bald spot scar on my head. Edit, listen. It shoots the laundry down. Also, a weight was dropped on my head. Shoot. 3 years old. Love M&M's. Find blue ones behind stove. Yum. Rat poison. Carrying a toilet by myself after having painted the bathroom. Got caught up in the drop cloth and fell on the toilet, smashing it and a piece of the porcelain cut into my knee. My father was there with me and immediately took me to the hospital as the bleeding was pretty decent. The doctor told me that the piece missed an artery by 1/4 and that if I had been a smaller man I'd have bled out before I made it to the hospital. Being a very large man, 6 feet 2 inches and 350 pounds at the time, saved my life. Many years ago I owned a pub. I went upstairs to the house area to find all the lights were off. I flicked the trip switches to turn the lights back on, which they did. I then heard running water from my co-owner's fish tank in the lounge. Turns out the protein skimmer had flipped over and was spilling water over the wall socket. Instantaneously, and very stupidly, went to turn off the plug and as soon as I touched it got sent flying over the back of the sofa. Don't know how I'm still alive to this day. I nearly fell into a freaking volcano leaning on a rope fence. Edit. Holy poop, this comment blew up. Right. More context. I was 8-9 at the time. And I managed to catch myself on that same fence after I nearly keeled over it. I never let go of stuff when I fall. This was in Italy. Hence the lack of actual safety procedures. I fell down my friend's basement stairs when I was 8, hit my head on the concrete floor, and ended up being airlifted to a major city hospital after being knocked out and still screaming. Ended waking up a couple days later and found out I was missing a tooth and I was told that as they were putting a breathing tube in. It knocked my tooth down my throat, which scared the docs more. But I was super happy cause I paid Malay for the first time in the game room and ate jello for meals. Turns out that I was actually in a comatose state and gradually got worse over 48 hours until I had zero brain activity for about 6 minutes. So I guess I did die, but I didn't find out from my family till afterwards. Because who tells an 8 years old that they died? Not wearing a helmet while on a bicycle and stupidly turning left just as a car overtook me. Somehow I only got a neat scar through my eyebrow and some torn up kneecaps from it. But the look on my mother's face when she picked me up from the hospital. That made me realize how profoundly stupid I was that day. Edit. I did make a turn signal with my arm. But the driver apparently didn't see it. He later went over to the hospital to ask if I was okay and to apologize for hitting me. Pissing off a cliff. Wasted on Jack Daniels. My girlfriend at the time pulled me back by my sweatshirt. Or that would have been it. Tubing behind a speedboat. Pulled myself too far forward. It submarined and popped up in the air. I was flung forward and got tangled in the tow rope. I remember organizing my room when I was 10 or so. I had a lava lamp on the verge of falling off my cabinet. I didn't notice until I heard a loud shatter on my floor. For some reason my brain thought it would be a good idea to pick up all the shards. I jabbed my foot with a huge piece of glass and passed out from the pain. Woke up in a hospital bed thinking it and realized the shard was gone from my foot, was stitched back up, and getting relieved looks from my family. Turns out when I passed out, I hit my head on the cement floor. I was living in my parents' basement and cracked my skull partially open and was bleeding profusely. I got taken to the hospital. My family thought I was dead. Not cement. Thanks for pointing out. Retensioning a garage door spring and the tension tool popped out. The door crashed with enough force to crack the pavement. Edit. Had no idea so many others have died doing this. Going forward would never do this again. As teenagers we used to smoke pot in the garage in the car with it running for hours. No idea how we didn't kill everyone in the house multiple times over. My dad got trashed and tried to jump over the fence at Yankee Stadium with his friends. He failed and an iron spike punctured him. He remembers being rushed to the hospital and bleeding everywhere. Everyone thought he was going to die of blood loss. Didn't die, but he also made several more stupid mistakes such as riding a motorcycle without a helmet and breaking several ribs etc etc. Honestly, he is still stupid and I'm surprised he hasn't died yet. Edit. With to without. I stumbled through a bush which had a 1 meter drop after it where I fell down. I landed on my back at the only place down there which didn't have a iron pole sticking out of the ground. Car crash at 80 km/h. I hit a car that was going through a red light perpendicular to my direction of travel, came to a dead stop after hitting the back quarter panel wheel of their car whilst they barrel rolled 3 times into the nature strip. I hit the windscreen with my head because I'm 6 feet 5 inches and wasn't wearing a seat belt because I thought I was top poop. Both myself and the other driver walked away unscathed, which was the most surprising of all. I was taken to the hospital because of my collision with a windscreen but was released shortly after some scans that came back okay. I don't know what saved me or the other driver that day, but I thought I died for several seconds after the impact and airbags went off, only to realize I was a bit dazed but generally fine, which followed with moments of disbelief and joy. Driving from Italy to France. I was going to meet up with my husband and should have just flown, but I wanted to bring our dog and I wanted to avoid renting a car when we got there. It was supposed to be a 12-hour drive, but once I got to Rome I realized I forgot my passport at home. I had to turn around and double back, putting me behind by 2-ish hours. Because of my backtracking I wasn't on the Morandi Bridge when it collapsed that day. I had a very bad rebellious phase. At one point, I ran away from home for a week and hitchhiked my way across my country along with one of my friends. For context, we were both 15-16 at the time. One of the cars that gave us a ride happened to be 2 suspicious looking foreigners, older men, who spoke between themselves in Turkish and only one of them was able to address us in our native tongue. But we were too dumb to realize the red flags. It finally occurred to us when they passed up our exit and refused to let us go when we indicated their mistake. I had to basically fake it as if my father knew where I was and that he'd be expecting me at a certain spot at a certain time. Not even knowing if that would work. It did. Miraculously, and they let us go in the middle of nowhere. We had to basically hitch another ride home. Boy, was I stupid. Riding my motorcycle like a jackass on back roads. Thought buddy gave the signal we were going to pass a car on a double yellow. I proceeded to throw the bike into the next lane without thinking it through. Was greeted by a work truck with a utility bed on it, wider than normal truck bed. Was already ahead of my buddy and almost next to the minivan that I thought we were going around. Decided my only option was to pin it, think skinny, and split right down the middle of the double yellow. I should be a grease stain. Had to pull over and think for a while after that one. Don't really ride on the streets much anymore because of this incident. I found the racetrack and am much happier taking my hooliganism to a closed course these days. My so's grandfather fell asleep at the wheel. Drove over to the wrong side of the road and crashed head-on with a juggernaut truck. He died. I lived. Glad I sat in the back. On the right side. One time when I was young and carefree I was riding a motorcycle for maybe the second time. Like 30 miles per hour. And just had some wires in my brain misfire. I was like, I wonder what would happen if I crossed my arms and held the left handlebar with my right hand, the right with my left. I'll tell you what happened. I just narrowly missed oncoming traffic and smacked right into a wall. Rolled an ATV at night very drunk and somehow didn't break my neck. Sold mine and the quad I was fixing for my brother the next week. Christmas Eve many years ago and I couldn't sleep, so I took to sleeping pills. Was impatient, so I decided to take 2 more heavy duty allergy medication on top of the sleeping pills. Being a young, naive boy, I had no idea the consequences of mixing medicine like that. That's maybe 3x the normal dosage for a 12-year-old. I felt extremely off for the following week or so. Trying to climb a slippery cliff face whilst stoned and being more preoccupied with not spilling some cheap alcohol. About 30 feet up I slipped and slid, stopping about a foot from the edge. And I spilled my alcohol. Well, does pre-existence count? When my mother was pregnant with me, she went to have an abortion, but as she arrived at the doctor office he asked her something along the lines of, "Woman, what are you doing here? Go home. The revolution has begun. They are shooting people?" So she went home because it was the start of the Romanian Revolution of 89 feet. So she decided to have me after all. Wasn't a mistake per se, but a chain reaction resulted in my existence. Taking a pill from a complete stranger while alone on a beach in Thailand in the middle of the night. Instead, we made out and he put me in a taxi to my hotel at dawn. The pill had been Ritalin. I was completely fine. Just more focused. And that's how I first became suspicious I might have AskReddit. Turns out I do. Almost drove a large truck into an idling Chinook helicopter's rotor blades. In my defense, it was dark and we couldn't use lights since we were in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq. My doctor took me, cold turkey, off of a high dose of a corticosteroid that I had been on for several months. My nervous system went into shock within 24 hours. Being a young, insecure boy on a motorcycle, I was driving a small car pulled in front of me and slammed their brakes. I couldn't stop in time. My truck wound up on top of their car. I was the only survivor of the vehicles involved. It would have killed me if my mom didn't tell me to put on my helmet when I got into an accident with another person on a bike. Was in 7th grade and my helmet was cracked in 2 pieces. Got away with 2 scars on my forehead and the other person had his bike destroyed. I grew up in the Rust Belt. Too many to mention. Playing in the industrial ruins. I've smoked pot inside an abandoned coal mine. Slept in a beehive coke oven. Jumped off barge loadouts to swim in the river. The list goes on. That I'm alive is nothing short of luck. Taking on a plus 70 hours a week job just for the money. I hated the job. I hated my boss and I hated myself. I could not look myself in the mirror anymore. I was this close to a heart attack. Gained 60 kilograms and could hardly sleep. But every month plus 12k on the bank account made me get up again and again. My wife said either you quit or I walk. Really saved my life. Cutting a piece of plywood on sawhorses with a skill saw that had the guard wedged up. Of course that piece of plywood broke before I was finished cutting. The saw fell and landed blade side up, still running, and I fell onto that. My arm saved my face from getting saw chucked. Flew a small plane into a squall line. When I was 4 I went to a hotel swimming pool with my brother and I said I could swim, so I jumped in the deep end like any 4-year-old, but then I started drowning. My 10-year-old brother jumped in and saved my ass. Day hiking empty Rainier around the Sunrise area. I went off the trail and started to walk up a slope of sharp, broken rocks. I mean, the edges were like dull knives. I was halfway up, and a big chunk of ground started to shift under me. Then it looked like the entire hillside started to slide. I freaked out and ran sideways as fast as I could, hearing this wall of knife rocks slide down behind me. Running like a maniac to school while not looking forward. One of my neighbors left their gate open and wham, I cracked my head open. and bleed everywhere on the sidewalk. I would like to personally thank the nice old lady who helped me stand up and walked with me a few houses down to my home. She may have saved me from dying of blood loss. Edit, in case of confusion. I did look up and that's when I ran into the gate. Edit 2, to clear up even more confusion. I was not looking where I was going before I hit my neighbor's gate. I looked ahead of me right before I ran into it. I also want to point out that I ran into the gate part of the fence. One last thing I want to point out is that I was 8 when this happened. So I don't remember the incident 100% clearly. Edit 3, this blew up way more than I expected it to. Goddamn. Thanks to everyone who has upvoted. Heroin addiction. 6 years clean and sober this year and I'm taking my second chance and running with it. I used to do 320 bags of coke, throw up, and then pop 4 or 5 Xanax bars every night for like a year. Definitely felt my heart skip some beats. I'm clean now BTW. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the love y'all. Buddy of mine cocked back a shotgun thinking it was empty. Pointed it at my back. Pulled the trigger. Nothing. His dad came in the room fuming at his son. Took the gun. Shot a hole through the garage door. It misfired. 17 years old. Driving down country roads at like 2 AM with a friend. We had just left the movie seeing The Pick of Destiny. Went and bought the soundtrack right after and we were blasting the CD. And I was driving like a maniac. My car was older so the speedo only read up to 85 but it was pinned the whole time. I didn't see a turn and there was about a 8-foot drop off right next to the road. Jumped over it and ended up in the middle of a field. After we calmed down we went and looked and my car split right between 2 trees. Hitting either one would have killed us both. We didn't have seat belts on. Trying to take a NyQuil pill last night but choked on it instead. Fricka was lodged in my throat for maybe 8 minutes I think. I got lucky it gave just enough room to keep some air flowing but lord there was a lot of pain as my body kept trying to eject it with more mucus than I have ever shot out before. My poor GF did her best to be able to call 911. She tried her best with the Heimlich but she's just not strong enough to force a good thrust of air out to dislodge it. The pill finally started dissolving and went down about a minute before the local fire department got here. That poop was by far the scariest in my life. I used to laugh when Joffrey choked on that poison but now I feel for him. Would have been a very poopty way to go. Now just have to deal with my fricked up throat. 145 miles per hour on a corner. On my bike. Thinking that it would look cool to overtake the whole pack of motorbikes ahead of me. At that speed. And worse. My girlfriend was a pillion passenger on the back. I get shivers sometimes thinking about what an idiot I was. And how reckless and selfish I had been. Sold my bike not long after. I think about it quite often. Even though it was almost 20 years ago now. It made me a lot more considerate of others in my care. A few years ago a friend asked me to take her dog to the vet as a favor. Her dog freaked out and ran across a super busy street. Without thinking I ran after him and through some miracle we both made it across the street and I was able to get to him. Even now. I get an ugly feeling in the pit of my stomach every time I think about it. Hey you. Thanks for watching Reddit Stories. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting like and subscribing. Your support means a lot. We also have a Discord community where we will be running giveaways and fun surprises throughout the year. Come along and meet some new friends. You look great today.